Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to talk some more about building custom reports. Now this video assumes that you have watched the first video on building custom reports, as well as the video on data types and all of the data point types under the asset. Let's go ahead and get started. In the last video we created my new report, and we put a beacon cell inside and we put some text. We briefly discussed how to insert an image but chose not to do so at this time. Let's go ahead and modify this report, and we're going to add the piece de resistance, if you will, the chart. The chart editor has more tabs than any other interface in StatusWatch and is the most complex. Now I'm not going to go into absolutely every tiny little option in here in an effort to save time, but you can see your manual, look into your documentation for StatusWatch for more details on all the nitty-gritty. I'm going to breeze through and try and give you a really quick once-over so that you get the basic idea of what each of these tabs do. On the General tab here, we can name our chart. As was mentioned in the beacon portion of the previous video, it is not necessary to name your chart, but it is often useful. If you have a report that has lots of charts in it, and one of those charts is put together incorrectly or is trying to reference some data point that no longer exists, or something is wrong, it may error your report. You may get an error, and if you get an error, it will give you the name of the offending report, offending chart element back in the error. So, if you have named everything new chart/table and left it all as the default, that will be far less helpful in determining what the problem was. For our purposes, we're going to leave them all at the defaults. The timespan tab allows you to set an explicit timespan for the individual chart. As was mentioned before, you can set a report level timespan where the entire report runs for a specific time, or you can set individual timespans for every element within the report. This is where you would do that. For our purposes, we're going to allow the report to dictate the timespan for each of the elements. But should we have wanted to set an explicit timespan for our chart, this is where we would do that. The Data Filters tab allows us to put in specific machines or specific calendars that will limit the data on the report. If we do not specify any data filters at all, it will run the report for all time and for all machines. Now, I don't want to set anything at the chart level. I will instead, again, allow the report itself to dictate which machines and which calendars are being run for this particular report. The Data Representation tab shows us what our chart is going to loosely look like. Do we want it to be a bar or a column or a line chart or a pie chart? Any number of different things. Also, we can choose from different major chart or table types by choosing detail table or a detailed chart, which would give us the strip chart or the value versus time scatter chart, or a summary table. I prefer, for starters, we'll use a summary chart, and I'll use a column. Over here on the right are a whole slew of visual options for defining and fine-tuning the look of your chart. You can set things like font sizes and the color of fonts and axis labels and where the value shows up relative to each individual column, and you can really tweak the chart out to look exactly like you'd like it. On the Data Series tab, we define what specifically is going to show on our chart. We know which machines, we defined that over in the Filters tab, or we allowed it to be defined for us by the report. But within those machines, what data points are going to be displayed? Now here is where we really tie in the concept of signatures. We talked about signatures in an early video. A signature allows your report to be machine agnostic. And if we use signatures as the series rather than specific data points on specific assets, we can make our report set up in such a way that it does not care what machine it is being run for. It simply goes and looks for whatever is tied to the appropriate signature as defined here on any machine you happen to run it for. signatures are the preferred methodology and should be used whenever reasonable when assembling your reports. For our purposes, we're going to go in and we're going to say, I'd like to see my in-cycle time and my downtime. Also here we can define colors for individual signatures. I'm going to choose a nice shade of green for my in-cycle time, and I'll leave it the default horrible red for my downtime. Let's move to the Data Divisions tab. I'd like to divide up my data in reasonable chunks. For this, I'd like it to be by machine, and so we'll add an asset division. A division is quite simply a method of breaking up the data into reasonable, visible chunks. Do I want a new set of bars for every machine? If so, I want an asset division, like I have here. Do I want a new set of bars every time I hit a new day? Then I would use a calendar division and define the daily calendar as my divider, etc., etc. And there are a number of other ways that you can divide up your data. Well, that's a simple chart. I mean, we haven't done very much. We have our in-cycle time and our downtime. We have a division set up to show us a new set of bars for every machine. We've chosen to represent it as a column chart. We've allowed the report to dictate the filters and the time span, so we're going to leave those the same. And we're going to go ahead and save. Here's our new chart. And let's close the report. And as simple as that, we made a new chart. Now, we simply need to go, load it up, and try to run it. I'll run the report by double-clicking. It'll bring up a prompt saying, okay, which time span would you like to use for this report? Because I told it that the user was allowed to override it at runtime, it's prompting me now. I'll say today is fine. And for my data filters, I'd like to run it against test lathes 1 and 3. Let's go ahead and view the report. It'll think for a moment, and there we have it. You see here the result of our beacon cell. The beacon came back with none of the above, meaning that none of the 2 states that I set forth evaluated back as being active. So we fell to the default state, none of the above. We have my title here that I put in as my text, that this is my amazing report. And I have on my chart here my in-cycle time and downtime represented as green and red bars, just as I had said. And we have a new set of bars for every machine because we had an asset division on there, so which means a new set of columns, rather, for every machine for which the report was run. Now, that was a very simple report, and it doesn't really have as much data as we might like, so maybe we would add a table to the bottom of this, or modify these colors slightly, add more bars so that we could see some of the subsets of in-cycle time. Maybe we want to see some of the members of downtime and see what was eating up all of our downtime. Looks like our downtime was off the charts for this particular machine, these particular machines. Again, we could make the chart or report as detailed as we'd like, but you see that we created that report in a matter of moments, and it is an entirely new report, entirely unique to this sit down and this video session, and it took us just seconds to build. And that's the real power of StatusWatch. It allows you to take your data, massage it, do math on it, group things together, tear things apart, and display them on a chart on your schedule and exactly the way that you would like. And we'll go into some more things in some other videos so that you can understand how to more detail and fine-tune these things. But that pretty much covers the beginning of report creation.